Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. Today, we're going to understand and appreciate The Hand by Guy de Maupassant. Make sure you read The Hand with Jimmy, and this will be the analysis to help us appreciate and understand it a little better. Ready? This is a classic horror story, and let's examine what makes it a classic and then dive into some of the details to appreciate what the writer did in this great short story. Wouldn't you agree with me on that? Wasn't this exciting? Well, first, we like to look at the narration. Is it third or first person narration? Remember, if the narrator is inside the story talking to us, it's first person narration. If the narrator is outside the story, it's third person narration. So exactly where is the narrator in The Hand? And why is the narrator important? Well, I'm going to tell you. I'm glad you asked. Because if he's inside the story, Jimmy has always told you the first sentence paragraph of any classic piece of literature is important because it sets the tone and gives clues on the narration. Why is the narration important? Because of the character. If the character is inside the story talking to us, then the narrator can be flawed. What does that mean? Well, he's like us then. He'll be human, capable of not always telling the truth, but only the truth from his point of view. In other words, if he's inside the story talking to us, he's one of the characters inside the story, and he could be lying to us, he could be exaggerating, or he could just be telling us the truth. But in any case, he's limited to what he knows. He won't be able to tell us what other characters will really be thinking. That's third person. So the first person narrator, there's many examples. Johnny Bear, Farewell to Arms, both of those are on this website. The third person narration is outside talking to us, and he will always tell us the truth. So first person inside, third person outside. Because if you don't believe the third person narrator, none of it makes sense. Now, you don't have to believe the first person narrator, but you can believe him as far as it goes until you catch him in a lie. And then he'll lose his reliability and he'll never be able to regain it again. The third person narrator always has reliability. Otherwise, the story doesn't work. The best example Jimmy has for this is the story of Job, which is in the Bible. Hopefully you read your Bible. It's important because there's a lot of allusions in classical literature to the Bible. So the story of Job begins like this. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and the man was perfect and upright and one that feared God and eschewed evil. If you don't believe this, any of this, the rest of the story makes no sense, especially if you read the story of Job, what happens to Job? He's just screwed. He gets tested, kids get killed, his crops are. It's a good story. And if you don't believe he was perfect and upright, one that feared God and eschewed evil, then whatever happens to him makes no sense. But actually, the narrator, who's third person outside, tells us that God made a deal with the devil to test Job. So, what about the hand? First or third person? Well, the hand begins like this. A circle had formed around Monsieur Bermuter, the examining magistrate, who was giving his opinion about the mysterious St. Cloud affair, an inexplicable crime which had been the talk of Paris for a month. Nobody could make head or tail of it. 33 words in the first sentence. 33 words. Followed by 8 words in the second sentence. That's not a lot of words, right? So what do we learn in the first sentence? Well, we meet Monsieur Bermuter. We learn that he's an examining magistrate. We hear that some kind of a circle had formed around him. And as he gives his opinion about the mysterious St. Cloud affair, and we see that the mysterious St. Cloud affair, right, is inexplicable. It's a crime that's inexplicable and was the talk of Paris. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking. 33 words. It's a lot to know in 33 words. I don't know if I ever used to. We don't know what is meant by circle, except we can speculate that it's people, right? These are people. Note the adjective mysterious in front of St. Cloud. And note the word inexplicable in front of crime. These adjectives mean something. They color the noun. If he just said, was giving his opinion about the St. Cloud affair, a crime which had been the talk of Paris for a month. If he didn't use those adjectives, it would just be a crime. You wouldn't know it's inexplicable, and you wouldn't know it's mysterious. You see? So examining magistrates investigate crimes. You have to figure that out by looking it up if you don't know what a magistrate is. And when we were reading it, Jimmy gave you a definition of that. But painting with words like mysterious and inexplicable help set the stage, doesn't it? So in the first sentence, he's setting that stage. The second sentence is short and sweet. Nobody could make head or tail of it. Sometimes people say heads or tails out of it. So nobody could figure it out. It's inexplicable. So who is saying this, and to whom is it being said? Who's saying this, and to whom? Well, someone's saying it, and it sounds like the third person narrator, someone outside the story. And who is he saying it to? Who's the narrator talking to? He's talking to us. The third person narrator is talking to us. He's talking to us. Got it? So, for example, if it was Monsieur Berthemier saying it, the sentence would be different. A circle had formed around me as I was giving my opinion. You see what I'm saying? If he's inside the story, it sounds different, doesn't it? But it doesn't sound like that. It's all third person, someone outside talking to us. So it also could be someone in the circle narrating it. Then if someone was inside that circle, one of the people listening to him, he could say this. This could be someone inside the story. So we still are not definitively sure that it's third person, right? So we're still not sure. So we continue reading. Standing with his back to the fireplace, Mr. Berthmutter talked on and on, marshalling the oven, blah, blah, blah. Several ladies had left their chairs to come closer, blah, 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 blah. Who's saying all this? The third person narrator. Obviously, the third person narrator, it's not first person. There's nobody inside that circle saying it because of this next sentence. They, who's they? The women, the ladies, shuddered and trembled, thrilled by the curious fear, that eager, insatiable longing for terror that haunts all women and tortures them like pangs of hunger. That, ladies and gentlemen, is conclusive proof that it's the third person narrator. Why? Because if you don't believe that, well, Jimmy, I'm a woman and I don't shudder and I don't thrill I don't want terror. I got enough terror in my life with my children. In order to understand this story, you have to believe the third person narrator, because the third person narrator always tells the truth. And if you doubt for a moment that terror is not exclusive or exclusive to women, think when you were a kid. Think about now. Why do you go to horror movies? Why do you like to see bloody movies? Why do you do that? When you're a kid and you tell a kid a story like this, he's going to have nightmares, but he loves it. Because why? It's just a story. But if you tell the story the right way, even a children's story like Hansel and Gretel, right? Or Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf's going to eat her. It's going to eat Red Riding Hood. Kids love to be scared. They really do. I don't like to be scared. But I understand fear. There's a certain amount of truth to being fear when you have a nightmare, wake up from the nightmare and say, holy shit. I mean, oh my gosh, that was horrible. But then you're so relieved, and there's a certain pleasure in having that nightmare just be a dream. You don't want a real nightmare like having a car accident. That's not good. Still, the next sentence gives us an idea of who the circle is. They fixed their eyes on his clean-shaven lips, uttering weighty words. Note the word weighty, and note clean-shaven, modifying lips. Who talks like that? If you were narrating the story, is that how you would describe what the ladies were doing? It's not until we get to that sentence about their shuddering that we can really conclude this is third-person narration. Pardon me. So, in 126 words, the third-person narrator set the tone for this story. It's a tone of mystery, crime, right? And to make ladies shudder. As the narrator continues, we validate. Here he continues. One of the ladies, was paler, and she said, "It's horrifying. There's something supernatural about it. What's it? It's the St. Cloud affair, the inexplicable crime that's the talk of Paris." She uses the word supernatural, and we will never know what really happened. But the magistrate turns to her and says, "Yes, madame, we probably never will know, but you shouldn't be using the word supernatural, right? It has no place in this affair." Why? The St. Cloud affair. The St. Cloud affair is a crime that was cleverly planned, ably carried out, and wrapped in mystery. We can't disengage it from the impenetrable circumstances, so we can't figure it out. But it's not supernatural. But I once had to investigate a case which really seemed to have something weird about it. And therein, ladies and gentlemen, lies one of the keys. He transfers from St. Cloud to this other case that was weird. But we had to abandon the investigation for lack of evidence. To further along the discussion, the difference between supernatural and inexplicable, which the narrator used in the beginning, right? Words have consequences. I want you to remember this. If you go online and look up words have consequences, you'll see there's some great essays. Words are used often. They have intended and unintended consequences. You can mean something, and then somebody can pick up something you didn't mean, right? We call this denotation and connotation. What does the word denote, and what does the word connote? Denotation, what does it denote, is what it means. Connotation is what it makes you feel. And words do both. Here's an example. He died versus he passed away. They both say the same thing, but they're different words. This one is harsher. This one is less harsh, but they both mean the same thing. We're dealing with a dead guy, right? So words have consequences. Supernatural versus inexplicable. Freedom is such a word. Freedom, who knows what freedom is, right? Well, I know it when I lose it. Maybe. That's another story. In the hands, supernatural versus inexplicable are talked about. Each makes you feel differently, doesn't it? And each means something different. They don't mean the same thing. Oh, how do you know that, Jimmy? Well, you could say, I could tell you be a smartass and look it up yourself, but here's a clue. They're spelled differently. Supernatural is not spelled like inexplicable, and they don't mean the same thing. Supernatural things are inexplicable, but not all inexplicable things are supernatural, are they? Are they? Just because you can't explain something doesn't mean it's supernatural. Yes, it does, Jimmy. I can't explain why the sun comes up and down. So to me, that's supernatural. You're free to use the word. We'll talk about that sometime with Humpty Dumpty, right? Humpty Dumpty was a character in Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. There's Alice in Wonderland is on my website. You should read that. It's really good. talk about words and word usage. But in this case, you can't make words mean, you can't make them mean anything you want them to mean, because then you'll sacrifice communication. So words have definitions. They also carry feelings with them. You understand? So Mr. Bermuter tells the ladies about a case that has something weird about it. Is weird supernatural? No, it's spelled differently. Okay, good. But it's weird. It's strange, mysterious. All these words that mean different things, right? Weird. Are you weird? Sometimes Jimmy thinks he's weird. Sometimes people call Jimmy weird. But I'm not weird. I'm not any I'm not any weirder than the next guy, and neither are you. Anyway, so it was weird, and they had to abandon that case. And of course, the ladies want to hear about it. Why do they want to hear about it? Tell us. Why? Because they long for terror. They want to be frightened. They want that story. They want that story. His smile, why is his smile grave? Because he's an examining magistrate. He can't be laughing out, his grave smile. So he tells them up front, before he starts his story, that he only believes in natural causes. And he emphasizes inexplicability as opposed to supernatural. Got it? So he's letting them know up front he doesn't believe in anything that's outside natural cause, which means the unnatural, which means the supernatural. Right? You got it? Do you believe in ghosts? That's another discussion for another time. There are stranger things in the universe. Read Hamlet. It's on my website. So he tells us the story when he was the examining magistrate. That's his current position, but in a town on Corsica, Ajaccio, where vendettas take place. Vendettas is a key word in this story. Do you know what a vendetta is? Jimmy defined it for you. Okay? Vendetta. Those affairs. Now look at the words he uses now who's he talking to? He's not talking to us. Well, Jimmy, how can you say that? We're reading it. No. We're reading it. But this guy, Mr. Bermuter, is not talking to us. He's not. You see these little quotation marks here? He's talking to the ladies. The rest of this is a beautiful example of a story inside a story. It's a story inside a story. So it starts out third person, it shifts to first person, and most of the rest of the story is first person, most of it, till the end. So it's a beautiful example of well-crafted story in a story. So he's talking to the ladies, and we're kind of just listening. Because the third person, in honesty, if you were to diagram this narration path, the third person narrator is telling what Monsieur Bermuter is telling the ladies. The third person narrator is telling us this. But this is what he's saying to the ladies. Do you understand? Very important. Very important. And look at the words that the third person narrator tells us that Monsieur Bermuter is using, right, to the ladies. Superb, ferocious, heroic, dramatic, revenge, age-old hatred, abominable strategies, murders, which are really massacres. All these words mean things, and they have connotations. And this is an older story, so this doesn't take place like in today. It takes place 100 years ago, right? At least, maybe 200. But it doesn't matter. Even it took place today with reading it today. And that's why I'm telling you, reading is much more powerful than any movie. And we're going to talk about the movies that were made about this story before we finish our analysis. And if you watch those movies, it will not beat this story. Why? Because you're the director, you're the producer, and you're overhearing this guy talk to these women through the third person narrator telling us about this story. And so far, all we know is that it's going to be a weird story. Vendettas, right? The quotations at the beginning of each subsequent paragraph tell us it's Monsieur Bermuter, who's not the third person narrator, but he's inside that story. The third person narrator is telling us what he said. And we have to believe the third person narrator, otherwise, right? But because Monsieur Bermuter is inside that story, one of the characters inside the story, he's a human being inside the story. He's talking to women who want to be scared, and guess what he does? If you read the story with Jimmy, you know what he does. He scares them. He scares the pants off them. You understand? Through his words. He's talking to the ladies who want to be frightened. So look how he describes his job and look at the words he uses. Superb, ferocious, heroic, incredibly dramatic, blah, blah, blah. 2 years he had nothing but the price of blood, wreaked vengeance. I had known old men and children and distant cousins who had their throats slit. They had their throats split. You know, just your imagination can conjure up a throat being slit better than any movie can show you a throat being slit. You understand? Well, Jimmy, I'd rather watch a movie. Good luck. Good luck. Just with these two words, throat slit. Your picture, the picture in your mind you draw up of that, nothing can duplicate what you see in a movie except your imagination can draw this up way better, way better. I'm not talking about going around and slitting throats. I'm just talking about words. So then we meet Sir John Roll, right? The mysterious stranger who moves into the neighborhood. No one knows about him but Mr. Bermuter, who's the examining magistrate, right? Even though he could probably knock on the door, hello, sir? Because he does something to meet him, find out about his name. But he's got to make up a situation. He could just go up to the door and knock on the door. So why doesn't he? And why is Bert Muir telling it this way? Remember, he's weaving a story. The ladies are listening to him. No television, no iPhones, no video games, nothing. Just words. He describes Sir John as a polite, easygoing Hercules. This is called an illusion. When he uses the word Hercules, that's an illusion. It's an expression designed to call something to mind without mentioning it explicitly. It's an indirect or passing reference. So you have to know who Hercules was in Greek mythology in order to appreciate the description of Sir John Roll by Mr. Bermuter, right? So you have to know about Hercules. Most people realize he was a strong guy. When Jimmy was a kid, Steve Reeves, a bodybuilder, would make movies. Lou Ferrigno made movies about Hercules. Other people made movies about Hercules. But did you know that after some years, Hera, who's the wife of Zeus, noticed that Hercules was a little too successful. So she made Hercules go insane enough to kill his own children. Can you imagine that? After he came back to his senses, he begged to be forgiven, but the gods decided the only way he could do that is to do some 12 impossible tasks. They were the 12 labors of Hercules, and you can look this up. But if you don't know this word is just another word, right? But if you know all this, it gives you a powerful, powerful meaning to what Sir John looks like. He's a polite, easygoing. Remember, he's a big man, big man. What were the 12 labors? Well, he had to kill the Numian lion. He had to kill the Hydra. That's one of those creatures where you cut off one head and two heads grew. The best one I like, he had to clean the Augean stables, the size of Rhode Island, with all horse shit. There were a bunch of horses on a piece of land the size of Rhode Island. You know how he cleaned up that horse crap? He diverted 2 rivers and just washed that poop away. Can you imagine that, being that strong to divert a river? I can think of some things I'd like to clean up like Hercules. Can you? I could think of some places. Then remember, classical literature is language, charged with meaning. So using the word Hercules. And then there's this. One evening, as I was passing his door, I caught sight of him sitting astride a chair in his garden, smoking his pipe. What does that mean? Just, I happen to be passing his door. Is this guy stalking, Sir John? I'm just asking. Well, Jimmy, he's the examining magistrate. Yeah, but remember, he's telling the ladies this story. So he doesn't really have to go into detail. He just says, I happen to be passing. In fact, as you read this and you're reading it now with me, one of the things I want you to think about is how true this story is. Now, what do you mean, Jimmy? Well, you'll figure it out. So he's the examining man. He finds out more details that in this encounter that John is a hunter, right? He hunts hippopotamus and gorilla. He describes this hunting, and then he says, the worst of all is man. Now, if you're the examining magistrate and you meet a guy, a hunter, a big guy, a gentle Hercules who says he likes to hunt, and he describes hunting hippos and gorillas and lions, and then he says, smiling, but the worst of all is man. What are you going to do? He suddenly burst out laughing. He says, I've done a lot of man hunting too. And then he talked about his firearms, and he invited me into the house. So he goes into the house now. And in that house, that's where he sees the hand hanging on a wall on black velvet with yellow Japanese fabric, right? Why is he using these words? He describes the words. Who's he talking to? It's Mr. Bermutir, right? Mr. Bermutir talking to the women. It was a hand, a human hand. No, it wasn't a skeleton, but it was a black, dried up hand with yellow nails. See, he's vividly using words to scare these people. Traces of dried blood, right? As if an axe cut clean through, around the wrist, and a heavy iron, and it's bolted to the wall, bolted, with a ring strong enough to tie up an elephant. So don't forget who he's talking to. He's talking to the ladies. So he asks Sir John what that is, and he says that's his worst enemy, who happened to be an American. Now, you remember about the British, right? The Revolution, where America, became independent, fought the British, and he's British, and this is his worst enemy. Has a big hand too, by the way. His hand was cut off with a saber, sword, skin with a sharp stone, dried in the sun for a week, and that was a stroke of luck, no mistake. He's lucky that happened. Why? Notice the double quotations when you're having the quotations outside. I touched the human relic. So now he's telling the ladies he touched the hand, which must have belonged to a giant. The fingers, etc., were abnormally long, huge sinews, strips of skin, some savage act of vengeance, vendetta. He must have been very strong, I said. Oh, yeah, said Sir John, but I was stronger. I put the chain on to hold him. Now, if you're looking at a human hand on a wall, chained with a heavy, heavy, heavy iron chain, and somebody tells you this, I put the chain on to hold him fast. That's the hand of my worst enemy, my greatest enemy. What would you do? Let's forget about being the examining magistrate. You're just you. And somebody tells you this. What do you think? What do you think? Well, Mr. Bermuter, pardon me, thought that he was joking. And he says, well, you don't have to chain that thing now. Notice he doesn't even question how that hand got up there, right? It's obviously maybe none of his business. But he says, you don't have, that hand is not going to run away. And Sir John says, seriously, it's always trying to get away. The chain is necessary. So now, not only do you see the hand there and the chain holding him, but the guy who hung that hand there is telling you that hand always tries to run away. What the hell is going on here? What the hell is going on? See, he looks inquiringly and wondering if he's mad or joking, but his face is inscrutable. You know what inscrutable means? It's a poker face. There's no emotion. There's no indication of anything. He's calm and benevolent, kind. There's actually a kindness in his face, benevolent. So the examining magistrate, Mr. Bermuter, changes the subject and admired his gun. So he switches topics, like any good examining magistrate should. I'm kidding. Why would you not pursue this? Why? What do you mean running away? I don't see it moving. But then the magistrate notices there's 3 loaded revolvers on various pieces of furniture, as if the man were living in constant fear of attack. Do you place guns in your home in different places just in case you're attacked? Well, Jimmy, it depends where you live. Think about this. So he's got guns laying on different pieces of furniture. He's got a hand tethered to the wall. Oh, is this guy nuts? Well, don't forget who he's talking to, Mr. Bermuter, right? Don't forget who he's talking to. So he goes to see him several more times, but then he stops. People get used to his presence, and nobody took any interest anymore. Dostoevsky, when we read Notes from Underground, has a great saying that's one of the truths of life. Man gets used to everything. People get used to everything. They just get used to it, right? They get used to it. After a time, you just get used to it. It's unfortunate. You shouldn't sometimes, because then you lose the joy of mystery, you know, the excitement of living every day and finding things new. If you get used to seeing the sunrise and sunset, then a sunset is pretty much no different than a sunrise, although if you can see color, Jimmy can't, but he can still see shades of color. It's different. The light in the morning is different than the light in the evening. I want you to think about that. If you just, well, Jimmy, I don't care about sunrise and sunset. Okay, that's okay. Well, you're missing a huge part of life, I think. Anyway, so a whole year goes by, and then John Rowell is murdered. So a whole year goes by, and then Mr. Bermuter gets the call that the guy's dead. So he goes to the drawing room. Here's the scene of the crime, if you'll remember. Sir John is lying there. He's been strangled. His neck was covered with, who's he talking to? Don't forget. His neck was covered with blood, 5 holes in his neck. The doctor comes in, looks like he's been strangled by a skeleton. Remind you of anything? A shiver ran down my spine. Whose spine? The examining magistrate. He's the narrator. He's telling the ladies the story, and he says, a shiver ran down my spine. What do you think's running down their spine? And he glances at the wall where he remembers seeing the hand, but the hand is gone. The hand is gone. It's gone. Right then and there, he probably has figured out that that hand may have killed Sir John, but he doesn't say anything. The chain had been broken and was hanging loose. So he bends down to examine the corpse, and inside the corpse, in the clenched teeth, he finds one of the hand's fingers that had been bitten off at the second joint. Visually, how are you going to duplicate that in a movie? And you can imagine the imaginations of these ladies just going crazy, right? You know, in the old days, they used to show crime off scene. They didn't show it online. Psycho was one of the greatest movies by Alfred Hitchcock. And even then, you didn't see the crime, did you? You saw the blood going down the drain. You saw in a blurred vision of the stabbing into the curtain, right, of Vivian Lee. You saw that. You saw that. And you didn't see the actual stabbings, the wounds, right? He was a master because he knows your imagination can't be beat. Alfred Hitchcock sat there, I'm sure. I didn't ever talk to the guy, but I admired him greatly. He sat there talking to himself saying, I cannot beat a person's imagination. So I can't show them the reality. I have to use their imaginations to create the reality. And that's what he did. And that's what he did. Isn't it? And then you get the servant's account. Remember, he dismissed the servant that he couldn't have killed Sir John. But then we get his testimony here. And this is what the servant said. For a month, Sir John was receiving letters that he would burn. He had received many letters, which he burned as soon as they arrived. Did he read them? He just burned them. He burned them. And then he would horsewhip, which looked like insanity to the servant, the hand. He would horsewhip it. Is the hand alive or dead? Well, Sir John says it's always trying to get away. Is Sir John nuts? Is he crazy? He went to bed the night of the thing, carefully locked in his room. He always had firearms. He always had guns. Guns. And during the night, he could often be heard talking loudly like he was quarreling with someone. Is he talking to himself? Read The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. That's another great writer on fear. So on the night in question, he made no sound. So he used to argue with himself, but the day he was murdered, there was no sound. And it was only when the servant had come to open the window the next morning that he found him. Nobody can't figure it out. They did a painstaking investigation, not just an investigation, but a painstaking investigation. And 3 months later, the examining magistrate, Bermature, has a nightmare. I got to learn how to pronounce French. He has a nightmare, right? The nightmare is what? He sees the hand crawling, right? Running down with his fingers. Jimmy, that's stupid. Maybe, but if you didn't have a video game and if you didn't have a cell phone, if you lived 200 years ago, I don't know. So when he's done, they find the hand, right? The next day, the hand with the missing finger is on his grave. It's on his grave. He was buried. They couldn't find his family or where to ship the body, so they buried him here. And this was when? When did this happen? The nightmare? 3 months after the crime. 3 months after the crime. He finds the hand on Sir John's grave. So the ladies are horrified, pale, and trembling. Mission accomplished. Right? But who says this? Well, it's not Mr. Bermutier saying that they were horrified, pale, and trembling. That's the third person narrator who has been telling us what Mr. Bermutier told the ladies. You see what a beautifully complex narration this is? And how he's got us. He's got us. His theory, Bermutier's theory, was that the rightful owner of the hand wasn't dead, and that he came back, right? He came back, although he doesn't know how he did it, but it was a vendetta. Well, why does he say that? He's been investigating vendetta since he got to the island, and this is a good story. It's a good story. It's the key to the story. But why is he telling it this way? Why is he telling it this way? Here's your real question. I'm going to put this down here. Is this story true? Is it true? Is Mr. Bermutier a reliable narrator? Is he a reliable narrator? Which means, is he telling the truth? We have to believe the third person narrator. And all the third person narrator is doing is telling what Mr. Bermutier has told the ladies. The third person narrator is not saying this is true or not true. He's just telling us what happened, like a good third person narrator should. I'm asking you, readers, what do you think? Is he telling the truth? Is this story about Sir John Rowell true? Or is he telling it just to make these poor ladies tremble and shudder and be afraid? Right? The thrill of the story, right? Quite frankly, I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters whether you think it's true or not true. I think it's a great story. And stories are what excite people, especially children and young people and even adults. How can you not get excited by this story? How can you not? Well, I'm not, Jimmy. Well, then reread it. Reread it and take your time. What if it is true? What if that hand was trying to get away? Well, Jimmy, I just think Sir John was just nuts. I mean, whipping a hand that's dead, for Christ's sake. And why didn't that copper arrest him, once he found out that that's a human hand of his worst enemy? I don't know. Maybe the laws are different on Corsica. The point... This is a classic story, not only because I say so, but because it's beautifully narrated. It's a story inside a story, and it also has, when he gives the evidence of the valet, that's a story inside a story inside a story. Tremendous writing, just beautiful writing. I don't know. Couple more notes. Aristotle says tragedy as plot, character, diction, thought, spectacle, song. You've heard me, if you've been reading with me for any length of time, we talk about Aristotle a lot. And so the most important is the plot. It's the representation of human action, and there's a lot of action in this story, even though it's just a guy talking, right? There's strangulations, there's shooting. All they're doing is talking, but there's a lot of action, isn't there? Murder. So Aristotle says plots can be simple or complex. A simple plot doesn't contain reversal or recognition. He defines these as moments where the protagonist, the hero, the protagonist, has a reversal. He realizes something he didn't know in the beginning. And none of that happens here. None of it. Right? It's just this. I think this is a simple plot, beautifully told, but still simple. Do you think it's simple or complex? I think it's simple because the characters aren't deeply developed. Right? We don't know much about them. We can speculate. All we know is that Sir John is he's like a big Hercules, right? He's got a hand chained to a wall that he beats. This is his greatest enemy. Cut it off. So it's just a nice story. By the way, Frankenstein, which was written by Mary Shelley, right? Percy Beth's wife, Mary Shelley, was also told, when you read it, maybe we should read Frankenstein, because it was a story also told as a story, right? And the narration of Frankenstein is very interesting. I'm not gonna jeopardize what we do if we read it. You read it, or we'll read it. Anyway, there's just two characters, Mr. Bermatier, who talks to the ladies, and then the central character is Sir John, maybe. That's in his story. So then you have the third person talking about both of these people. So it's a simple plot. Maybe you think the hand is a character, because maybe you think that Mr. Bermatier's explanation that the owner of the hand came back and killed Sir John in a vendetta, in a fit of revenge. Maybe you believe that. Although Mr. Bermatier, the examining magistrate, can't figure it out how he would do that. But maybe that's in it. There's a lot of explanations, including supernatural, or in the examining magistrate's word, weird. Aristotle also said it should be unified. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. But it's not the end that the ladies like. It just ends. And then he tells them his theory that the owner of the hand came back and killed Sir John. But they don't like that. Why don't they like that? Well, it's too obvious. It's not going to be terrible enough. Of course, not terrible enough. An American, right, comes to Corsica to find the guy who cut his hand off, and then kills the guy and takes his hand back, and 3 months later hangs around Corsica enough to put it on the grave. Talk about weird. But it doesn't have to make sense. It just has to, and this is a wonderful story of entertainment. And it gives you an idea of what people do. Here's a side note. Guy de Maupassant studied law and served in the military during this war. And his literary education came through his informal relationship to a guy named Gustave Flaubert. Flaubert is a very, very, very famous writer. I think we'll read Madame Bovary, although I don't know if we will. But it's certainly a classic. Maybe we should. And Flaubert believed never waste words. If you count the number of words in this story, full count, I don't know any word you can take out. This includes Roger Colette's translation. There's not one word you can take out of this and not hurt the story. So, for example, I'm afraid, ladies, that I'm going to spoil your terrifying dreams. Which word would you take out of that sentence to make it more compressed, to make it more so I don't use all those words? I can't see any one of them. If you take this out, I'm afraid, ladies, that I'm going to spoil your terrifying dreams. If you say that Mr. Bermuter said, I'm going to spoil your terrifying dreams, that loses something. He says, I'm afraid, ladies, because that reminds us who he's talking to, right? I'm going to spoil your... That's why he's telling them this story, so that they have terrifying dreams. And so we have terrifying dreams. So every word means something, according to Flaubert, right? Okay. Another side note. There was a movie called The Hand that was directed by Oliver Stone, who did JFK, Born on the 4th of July, Oliver Stone's famous director, and it starred Michael Caine. Jimmy never saw this movie, but it's called The Hand, right? Caine delivers a spectacular performance as a cartoonist whose hand is severed in an auto accident. When his marriage and career fall apart, the hand mysteriously returns on its own murder spree. I'm just saying. The hand returns mysteriously. One more side note. This is the movie Jimmy saw when he was a young man. He didn't know it was based on Maupassant. This is The Beast with Five Fingers. You should see this movie. You see this guy here? This is Peter Lorre, one of the great actors of all time. Your flesh will creep at the hand that calls. Sorry. You've been reading with Jimmy. This has been the analysis, the understanding and appreciation of a terrific horror story, entertainment story called The Hand by Guy de Maupassant. Read other Maupassant stories. By the way, if you really want to be terrified, read The Horla, which is on this website by Guy de. I love the reason Guy de Maupassant is on Jimmy's website is because not only does he write classical literature, he's a terrific writer, and his stories are just, they're just, I admire him so much. Anyway, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Thank you so much for reading the analysis of The Hand by Guy de Maupassant. Now go out and get some sleep. Don't have nightmares. But if you do have nightmares, just wake up. Jimmy had a nightmare last night. And he woke up and said, I'm glad it's just a dream. Bye.